Welcome back to another episode of Know Your Legacy. I'm your host V, and today's guest is Norma Bastidas. There is no other way to describe Norma apart from the fact that she's a living superwoman, and you'll understand why when we get into the conversation. But she's the fastest female in history to complete 7 of the hardest ultramarathons across 7 continents in 7 months. And she's also done an insane distance for a triathlon, and also is a speaker and an author who inspires women continually around the world to become leaders in their own life and to break the monotonous cycle that families can often build up over generations. So it's amazing to have you here, Norma. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm excited to get into some conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me, B. I'm very excited.
So I think the person who turned me on to you is Alia, good friend of both of ours, and she was like, oh, once we finished speaking, she was like, I need to introduce you to a friend of mine. I was like, yeah, go on, okay, cool. And she was like, I'm not going to give you an introduction, just Google her. And I was like, okay. And then I looked and I was like, wow, this woman's completed a lot of stuff. And then to see, I guess, your story or background or the context in which you did all of those things, it makes it that much more crazy and inspiring for people that are listening. So I do want to get into all of those things, but before we do, what would you say are some of the things that come to mind when you think about your childhood, whatever age that might be for you?
Wow. I mean, that's complex. I mean, that's usually where everything kind of starts, because I guess I'm unlike everybody else's. I have some amazing memories, but I also have some very difficult, conflicting memories because of circumstances of where I was born. I was born in Sinaloa, where the cartels are from. Also, the family dynamics. My father was suffered from mental health and alcoholic, and I also, was born in in a volatile environment, and with an abusive grandfather as well. So it was a lot. But sometimes it's I guess it's just, I can think of amazing memories growing up in Mexico, and I'm right here in Canada, and I just came back from Spain with my sisters, and we go flip-flop from like crying full on to laughing out hard, because that's who we are.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think from listening to some of the things that you've mentioned on, I guess, your website, and also some of the other interviews that you've done, I know that you mentioned that your childhood was kind of volatile, to say the least. But what would you say was, I guess, some of the earlier challenges that you had that you felt like, okay, this is actually something that I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of?
For as long as I can remember, there was always, stress at the home. And I'm the youngest of 5. So not understanding fully, I still had the sense that there was something that wasn't normal. And I guess now I understand it's because my father was an alcoholic. And, that's always, for as long as I can remember, I had to be very careful. And that kind of set precedent for me to not being able to speak up when eventually I found abuse over and over again, because I always learned that, standing up meant paying consequences, right? My siblings were the ones that had to pay the consequences of my father's anger, but I didn't. I was the one, the pleaser. I was the one that smiled and never said anything and try to, and I think that's the reason why when he died, that I was the one that it was easily targeted by abusers, because I had learned to not say anything because I was afraid of the consequences. So, I mean, that was that's before my understanding. And then the moment where really everything shifted from, I don't understand, this is something on the surface, to understanding fully that, something terrible had happened, was being raped at 11 by a relative.
Yeah, that's very intense for someone of any age, especially if you're 10, 11, 12. Like, the younger you are, the more traumatic it is, because that then sits in your emotional body, like your nervous system. It just shakes you up, and then you've got so many years ahead of you that I guess your perspective on life is distorted from that point onwards. So what was
From there on, there's no turning back. There's absolutely no turning back. I didn't have the language of understanding that it was sex. I was raised Catholic, so we didn't have a lot of conversations about maturity and about, your body, and it was, was treated very, secrecy, with some things like don't, so I didn't have the language, and rape certainly was not something. I just understood that something terrible had happened because of what happened, how traumatic it was, and how it made me feel.
So what is it like processing that at like 11? Is that something you can just tell your parents? Is that something like, how does someone like that handle that situation?
No, because it's something. It's usually when you're a child, and the majority of the times when a rape, especially when it's a child, it happens with somebody you trust and love. So it is conflicting, and it is incredible. Like there's absolutely no way that I can explain the conflict and how you know that this is terrible, but how you're unable to say that, something to anybody, because obviously, you're told not to. And that's what you do, because, you're taught to respect the people in your life. And it follows, like it is such a conflicting, and I'm not an expert to understand. I just know how it felt. It was just something that it made me feel as terrible as it made me feel. I still trusted the person, and it was like, the person telling me that it was normal, and that it was, there was something that I shouldn't tell anybody, that there was something that happens to everybody, and that's how you grow up. And I was 11 and things like that. It is such a conflicting. So I think I wasn't able to articulate it. I honestly thought I was going to get in trouble, and it turned out to be true. Eventually, when it became known, I was in trouble. I was in trouble because it's like I should have known better. But but it is such a. But my behavior changed from then on. Like I was never the same. Like from then, I couldn't sleep. I started experiencing nightmares. Behavioral problems, losing weight. I started to be diagnosed with with depression shortly after. So even though I wasn't able to articulate, my behavior changed immediately.
If someone's listening right now and they've gone through something themselves like that, or they know someone who has, what would you tell them now if you're looking back?
To pay attention to their behavior, not to tell, if there's a child and you start behaving differently, not to tell them not to, usually it's like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, oh, thank you. So it is me, right? And he just kind of like, okay, let's sit down, let's talk about it. Is there anything? And to give it time, because it took me, I think, to be able to articulate that was not until in my 20s, and certainly everything, I was already in my 40s when I actually came clean and start talking about everything that had happened. But because it is, like I said, even if somebody had asked me, had anything happened, I probably would have said no. Because it's not a simple thing that you just can talk about, because I have no idea what was I going to say. But just to, if there's a change, and we tend to, because I started getting into trouble to get attention, and the more trouble I got, the more people pushed me away. And it's the opposite. If you have somebody in your community and your family that is acting out, that is getting in trouble, pull them in closer.
Yeah.
Don't push them away. There's a reason. Nobody chooses to do things like that unless they're asking for attention.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of some of the people that I've spoken to who have gone through traumatic events, whether it's, similar to you or something else, the reason people tend to do that is, from what I've seen, is because one, yes, to gain attention, but then also as almost like a defense mechanism to push people away. So it's like, I don't want you to get too close. I don't want you to get too close to me. I don't know how true that is for the way you were feeling.
It's true. I think it just, there's a lot of things. Eating, I started developing anorexia, I started developing bulimia, anorexia, and also self-harm. Those were the first huge signs, that they were immediately, and I think and also that, like you said, you just are afraid of people, afraid to pull them in and push it closer. But I think also you start doing things to match the pain that is internal. You want it physical. And that's really because, we understand physical pain, but we don't understand emotional pain. I mean, that's not something that we talk about. And I do with my children. I do, my kids are grown men now, but they have a full vocabulary of feelings, not just angry, but it is, and that's what you want emotional intelligence, but we don't. And I just kind of needed to do things. And that's where the self-harm is, to match the pain physically of what was, feeling internally, because I didn't know how to articulate it.
I think what grows from that as well over time is like you get this, like underneath all of that, whatever all of those emotions and feelings and self-talk is, the basis of that feeling is I'm not good enough, or maybe I don't deserve the things that I want. And then you don't say that to yourself, but you're feeling that so deep on the deepest level that you end up doing things that matches that, basically, that I'm not good enough, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, get in trouble, and all of those things.
Right. And culturally, we don't really encourage it. Like even now, I still suffer from post-traumatic stress and depression. And I might be diagnosed bipolar, same as my father. I mean, it's not such a simple. So, I mean, us, in every single time it does come. There's something that triggers. There's sometimes I have a hard time, and I talk about it openly. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not feeling well today, and I feel sad." And it's like, "Oh, you should like write something." And I'm like, "No. Let me explore it. Let me be comfortable." And I'm so comfortable with those feelings. It doesn't make me afraid. It just simply, I need to understand them. So I need to understand what is that I need. Is it something, do I need to time off? Do I need a break? Do I need to pull, all those things are wonderful. But as soon as I talk to somebody close to me and I said, I'm feeling, rather sad today. It's like, "Oh, just write something you're grateful." And I was like, it's not like I'm not grateful. It is something. And I want to understand why. And sometimes I just need a break. Sometimes I just need to pull myself closer because that's what I need. And but we're a society that we just like, be grateful, bless. And I'm like, it's just, like, don't be afraid of that. It isn't normal. Every feeling is normal, right? And sometimes you just let yourself be there, or sometimes there's some adjustments you need to make in your life, right?
No, you're most definitely right. Something I've realized recently as well, that every feeling is just neutral. It's the meaning that you give it, or the perception you have of that feeling, whether it's good or bad. It's just when you're feeling sad or depressed or anxious or nervous, they're not bad things. It's just an indication that your body's giving you, this is where we are. And then you stay with it and you sit with it, give yourself time and space to figure out, why am I kind of feeling this way? What's going on with me? Let me, as you said, let me explore it. And I think from, what you've said about your grandfather and your father, etc., I've had a similar thing from experiences of people in my life and family, to see how things get passed down and it becomes part of the culture. And it's just the norm, right? So this is where the idea of breaking the cycle comes in, because you're like, actually, no, I don't want to have that knee-jerk reaction to the way you deal with things. And one of the things that came to mind was when you gave the example of, for example, if you tell someone you're sad and they're like, "Oh no, just be grateful." And it's fine to be grateful. But what I've realized recently doing emotional intelligence work is that is actually a reflection of how scared that person is, because that's what they would do in that situation. If they were feeling sad, automatically think of, "I'm not allowed to feel this way. I shouldn't. That's bad. That's wrong. Let me think of something I'm grateful for." So it's an interesting idea, actually, and it's not something that you'd fully understand until, I guess, you've done some exploring, right, internally.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we do need to have those conversations. And I think that's probably why, I mean, there's so many other factors, but there's also being unable to talk about it, being unable to understand it. It just meant that the cycle just kept, I kept moving and I kept trying to find a way out, but I was unable because I just kept pushing everything down. And that's the difference between my life now and, and before in the now, is because one day I just couldn't. It was like like a volcano. I found myself in this exact same position, but, on my mother's side, like, having a child who was 11 years old with a disability and single and lost my job. And then, as a single parent in a foreign country, that's where it's like the parallels is like, here I am my mother. And if I'm not careful, history is going to repeat itself, and I am not going to allow it. I am actually not going to pretend it didn't happen. I am not going to hide from it. We're going to talk about the disability. My son is going blind. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to give him the tools. I am going to seek help instead of retreating and hiding. And that's when, but that's the thing. Once I open one door, all the doors and the windows and everything open. And that's where the running came from, because I could not cope with everything that I had denied myself to acknowledge. It all came at once. And I also had a child to look after. So the running became a way of coping, that it was a positive, because I had done the negative coping, because it's impossible not to try to help, when you're drowning, not to seek for something that you can, rely on, float for a little bit until the storm passes. So I just needed something with the responsibilities. And that's where running came from. It was just simply, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't cope. I just had all these things that in my head that I needed to, to deal with it, acknowledge. But I also had to get up and say, hey, let's go to school. You're going to be okay.
What made you want to, I guess, go straight to running or doing some form of activity rather in the midst of all of that stress, rather than smoking or drinking or any 101 things that you could have chosen? And maybe you did do them, I don't know, but
Not this time. I had kids. I mean, I had kids, and I was a single mom. I had kids, and I was in Canada, and I had done it in the past, and it was something that worked for me. And it wasn't an excuse, but it was like good enough. I just simply didn't want to face the things, and I needed something. And I always found my way out. I'm not sure that I have an addiction as much as I abuse substances to cope. But I was always able to just kind of I need to sleep, I need to put it away. And then eventually I continue my life and continue trying to improve. I learned, languages. I graduated from college. So, but it wasn't like, it was just something. This time is different. I have kids. I could not, as much as I wanted to drink at 3 a.m. because, like I said, I couldn't sleep. And the relative that raped me as 11 was a blind relative that I was looking after. So my son is going blind. I mean, there's the pair, like right there. It's like, like the universe just like crashes, like, acknowledge me. So it was a lot. It is not his fault. It has nothing to do with blindness, but I couldn't ignore the parallels. And that's kind of why I had such a hard time. And it wasn't about me happening, but it was just something that I just felt a bit like, oh, I can't believe you're still trying to hurt me, which it wasn't. It's unrealistic, right? It is unrealistic, but I can't help if I feel that way. So the running was because I have kids. And if I wasn't careful, my mom was overwhelmed with 5 kids. She wasn't educated. She couldn't work. She was so busy looking after us and trying to find food that to pay attention that what was happening. And I can never fault her, but that's because she was so busy surviving. So when here I am in Canada with a son who's 11 years old, just like me, gone blind, and I'm so busy trying to provide for my son, I realized that the risk, it's real. And I thought this could happen. We are, immigrants and with this disability. So statistically speaking, it could happen. And that's where I woke and I was like, no, I am not going to. And the drinking, it helps you with trying to cope with everything, but it also stops you from seeking help and also from being aware. So I didn't want to be numb. I just wanted something to take to being able to, like I said, to take the edge off what I was feeling, So the running was easy because I just, I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't somebody who exercised. I was so busy raising kids and trying to put food on the table. So it was something that I did. My mom came from Mexico to give me a hand. So it was easy. I couldn't sleep, and I have both of my kids in bed because they were like, one was scared to go to school and the other one was 11, and both in bed. And I thought, trying to cry, trying to stop, not waking them up. And I just kind of lace up, and I told my mom, like, I'm just going to go for a run. My mom was like, oh, great, you need a boyfriend, so look better. And I was like, it had nothing to do with that, but it was easier. I was the one in charge. I couldn't worry them, but my mom was like, oh my God, yes, yeah, you need to lose weight and stuff. And it was just something that I could do. And the difference that I noticed is that I felt better. Wasn't, and it's something that I noticed, like, you cannot run and and sob at the same time. You know, I really had a good run until I just collapsed, cried, had a good cry on a curb at 4 a.m., whatever it was. And then I came home and I felt better. And I will be in the morning feeling positive. So and that's how it happened. It was just simple. I didn't need equipment. I didn't need training. I just simply could step outside of my house and go for a run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like you almost had like a why and a reason to not go in the wrong direction from that point. So, and kids is a big one. Having kids is a big one, because then it's like your life depends. Your other human beings are relying on you. So
Yeah. I mean, I might mess up, but it wasn't something that consciously was going to do it. And having the excuse of my children having a terrible life and me, you know, telling them 20, 30 years later, like, I'm sorry, I couldn't raise you better because this happened to me, was not something that it made me feel good about it. It was like, it's, you know, like it might be relevant to me, but not. And also I wanted to break the cycle. I was just like, this needs to, because I do know that, you know, it happened to my mother, it happened to my grandmother. So I was like, eventually one of us, and I hated it had to be me, but somebody had to make the decision, say, this will stop right here. And it is difficult. It is difficult, but it's a conscious decision that said, I will break the cycle no matter how hard it is. And, you know, like I said, I look at my kids and I was like, it was the best thing that ever happened. It was like, I absolutely love my kids so much that I was willing to face every fear just to be a better mother.
I love that. Yeah, I can just hear the passion in your voice as well. And I hope that people that are listening, I actually not even hope, like I know that people that are listening are going to be inspired, because I was listening to, I was listening to a little bit of the talk that you did with Jeanette. I think that was a few months back, right? So she's a good friend, and I had her on my podcast a few months back, and yeah, I think she was blown away by the way that you were speaking and the story that you had. And um, just listening, I don't know if you've ever listened back to any of the interviews that you've done or read some of the stories, but
I don't.
you should
I'm
listen back
always
to
afraid.
the way you sound.
I know. Really, I am always afraid. I am so uncomfortable listening to my own interviews or reading. Once in a while, I might do just to make sure that it's anything that you know needs to be clarified. That I do. But I mean, but it's difficult. It's
Yeah,
very, very
you
difficult.
can do it. Trust me.
You have to understand. I mean, this is the life I live. But sometimes when I mean, I just finished editing the book again that I didn't want to publish. But every single time I can talk and I'm passionate, but then I listen, and it's a step back of understand that all those things happened to me, and it's never going to be a time when I'm going to be comfortable with that. You know, like it's just like it's a lot, and people always said it's a lot. I was like, try living it. And it's not a factor. I do want to spend more time now talking about who I am than what happened to me. But I do understand that we need to understand what happened to me, so we make sure that nobody feels that there's something too big for them to overcome. I'm like, listen to my story. There's absolutely nothing too big that you can overcome, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but neither is breaking a world record. Right.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I went that direction. It is a metaphor. I was like, just watch me. It takes an incredible effort. And it is what I do with my life. And I just kind of find the parallels. It's you know, it's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So when did you move over from Mexico to Canada?
I didn't. I was trafficked when I was when I was 19. I went to Mexico City. I was kidnapped, and then I ended up going back to Culiacan, terrified of, you know, because my home was not safe. So neither was my neighborhood because of the cartels. And now Mexico City, Mexico itself, had become very dangerous for women like myself, vulnerable women, because, you know, I've been working since I'm 14 years old, and I'm not saying part-time, fully on working. I was the one that was supporting my entire family at that point. I was a 17-year-old. And so I needed to find a job, and somebody, you know, came looking for women to work in Tokyo, young women, and I accepted. I was actually begging for that opportunity when I heard that they were looking for somebody, because I not understand that this is human. It wasn't even a talk of human trafficking. It wasn't even, a crime against humanity. The United Nations didn't pass a law until about 2002, and this is 86. So, when they say that they were taking girls to Japan to model and to work as hostess, I asked to be introduced, and I accepted the job. Within 3 months, I was in Japan. And unfortunately for me, they took my passport and I ended up working as an escort. It was something that I never told anybody. So I spent many years in Japan. I tried going home. It didn't go well. So I ended up in Japan for about 6 years, learned Japanese. And that's eventually when I ended up in Canada. I met my ex-husband in Japan. I already had paid my debt, and I was working as an actress and model, and spoke fluently Japanese, and I was translating movies, but I was attacked and almost murdered when I was about 25. And then I understood that it was never going to end, because I stood up to, it was like, there's no way that I could blend in. It didn't matter how well I spoke Japanese. It was something that made me a target. I had also, because I was doing commercials and soaps, and I had a stalker, and the police just kind of like, what do you want us to do? Right. You were, with a tank top on your last commercial. And it was just something that I just got exhausted, and I couldn't go home. And I met my ex-husband and married him. And he's the father of my kids. And that's when I moved to Canada when I was about 25.
Wow. That's already like by 25 for someone to have gone through so much emotional trauma.
2 murder
What?
attempts. Yeah. Several rapes. Yes.
But that's what I'm saying. So what's going through your head at that time?
It's just, you don't have time to, you don't have time to dwell on things. Why? It's just more like, and I think that's something that helps me a lot. Eventually once I'm safe, I was like, whoa, what happened? But at that point, I have the ability to say, what do I need to do? I'm not safe. What do I need to do? And that's kind of what, immediately it was just trying to get myself. I think I spent a couple of months of grieving, of kind of like, this isn't fair and everything. And the drinking, that's what the spiral like down, the drinking and everything. And then it was like, okay, stop. I need to, because I still had to continue supporting my family, my mom, my siblings, my sister had 2 daughters. So all those things that, I didn't have the luxury. I was like, well, let me just explore these. Is like, how can I keep myself safe while still helping my family? And, like that's basically, and I think having the ability to switch quickly from trauma to what do I need to do and find a way out. It's what makes me excellent at doing world records, because things can go wrong and I can quiet the mind. I was in Mount McKinley, and there was a storm. We summit. It was just my partner and myself. And then on the way back, we just encounter a lot of people in trouble, and we help rescue. And it is the ability to quiet the mind at that moment. It's not whose fault it is. They shouldn't have done it. It's just, what do we need to do? And then once we're back in camp, like, what did just happen? It's like, oh my God, that guy had no arms. One was in a crevasse, and we pull. But it is having that ability. And I think I perfected it because, unfortunately, I was thrown in and I had to make this quick decision.
That's a powerful ability to have. Yeah, because I've recently, the reason I say that is because recently I've taken more and more of an interest in yoga. And that is really about turning into more so than just a physical fitness thing that the Western, I guess the Western part of the world has turned it into. Is more about turning internally and focusing on what's actually happening in terms of the energy in your body, the way it's moving. And when you do that, you realize how much your mind is out of control. And so to be able to control it and tame it in a situation of high pressure or high intensity is a skill. It's not something that people can, you're not just born with that. Like everyone has this issue of how to control the mind. That's why meditation has blown up and become such a popular thing, because it just appeals to people who are so busy, which most of us are in the Western world, constantly on the go, looking at notifications, looking at the next best app or the next best product or service, whatever it might be, that we're thinking one thought from the next. And so if we find ourselves in a traumatic situation, how would you say is the best way to get to that level of quieting the mind? Because not everyone has gone through a similar situation to you where they've had to do that without realizing.
It depends on the situation. I mean, if it's something, I mean, unfortunately, we do, and I think I cheer for the things too when it is something of unfortunately what's happening right now with the shootings and everything. It is about safety, right? It's like there's nothing else that in it's how you need to be able to survive. So the most important thing is what to do, so to save your life, right? And once if that's not a factor, if it's anything else, if you're not there, but it could, and I always say importance over urgency, right? We focus on urgent all the time, and I was just trying to explain this to somebody who was just having a hard time, and I was like, if your boat is filling out with water and you keep doing these, it's not going to fix anything. It's just going to make you exhausted, and it feels, but it is urgent because what is like, take the time to find the source of where the water is coming from and fix it. And let the water, like the water might come up to here by the time you finish, but that's the only way to stop it. So it's important over urgency. We all go for the urgent thing. Also, you have to be able to just quiet the mind in terms of an emotional, put the emotions on the side. They are irrelevant. Whether you were right or wrong, is fair or unfair. Those things have absolutely, they're factors. They're not factors. They're just something that you can, eventually just kind of call friends and have a glass of wine and go over like, this is not something should have happened and complain. But when you're trying to help yourself, the emotions have no meaning. You just have to be able to say, what do I need to do, right? And just simply, it is simple. It's like, what do I need to do? Whether it takes a long time, it's fair, you're the only one, those things are irrelevant. Irrelevant. You just simply, what do I need to do to get myself, whether it's accepting or need to do something to get yourself to to where you need to be. And that's very, very simple, right? And I mean, it's simple, but it's so difficult because we still hang on to that. It's like, and we do it to ourselves. It's not fair. I'm always in the negative talk, right? Whether we blame somebody else or we blame ourselves, we spend so much time and waste so much energy. It's like, it always happens to me. I knew I wasn't smart, and things are never going to happen. It's like those things is like, nobody needs that, right? So it's just simply trying to be safe and trying to find, spend time figuring out what you need to do next.
I love that. It's a grounded approach, taking the most important thing into the equation rather than urgent, because everything is urgent these days. And for people who are listening, Norma was doing the action of removing the water from the boat, and it's powerful because actually the problem of the water is just going to keep coming because you're approaching the problem in the wrong way. So if you just remove the fear of I'm going to drown and die and allow the water to fill up and find the source, just get to the root of the problem, then it'll stop for good. So I love that. I've never heard it being put that way, but it's a really good way to make decisions moving forward, because in this day and age, especially in London, like, I don't know if have you been to London before?
I haven't.
Okay.
That is the one place I know. I haven't, but yeah,
But
close so many times. But,
yeah, London, especially the city of London as well, the heart of London, is where things move very, very fast from morning to night, and it's almost this mentality of not stopping, and that's where you almost get spending too much time there. You naturally catch a bout of anxiety or nervousness just because you're around people who are constantly moving. And just thinking about one thing to the next. And I think it's important sometimes just to take a step back and breathe and reflect on where you are so you can make the right decision moving forward, the important decisions, rather than just doing whatever's urgent to you.
Yeah, life seems so urgent all the time. Like, I mean, with, now we carry our phones and all these things, like, so it's constant stimulation of urgent. So it is very easy to lose focus of what's important.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a skill and it is a discipline that you do. And so I'm always, spending, like I said, it's just something that you just need to just ignore, and it's okay. And you'll, like I said, it's urgent. So you just need to prioritize it and be comfortable, because I mean, we do that all the time. even today when we were talking about the mic and everything, I was like, okay, I spend more time trying to make sure that I was on time, that I had an area where it was quiet, that it had a good sound, than trying to respond quickly, right? So I was like, okay, so I just put that to the side, and I was like, I'm taking care of what I need to do. That's more important. And I think there was like 10 people. It's like, did you get that? And I was like, don't worry about it. I was just kind of like, it's fine. I was so comfortable because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. That when this interview came, I was ready.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference between, I could have taken time, but I was so pressed for time with everything that I need to do. I was like, I'm going to spend more time doing what I need to do than trying to respond and calm everybody around me, because it was a madness, I know. So that's everybody's life. Everybody can relate on that, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. So what happens at 25 then? Because you're in Japan, you're finding yourself in this situation. How do you actually get back then without a passport, right? You don't have your passport on you.
I do now. I mean, at this point, I did end up paying my debt. Why? Because people don't. Human trafficking it's slavery, is human trafficking, but most of the people are trafficked, and most of us, like, it's a complicated issue, but we do end up getting our passport back because we're the great promotion. If we go back to our country with money, it's so easy to continue bringing girls, right? So it's not that they stopping. It is, human trafficking is not something that they deprive you of your freedom 100%, and we're locked in basements, and because then there's no crime. It's so easy to we were free, but there's no way that I could go home. I had absolutely no way of getting home. So there's no crime. It's easy to get away. So most people that are trafficked are in situations of being unable to go back home because of safety, because of resources, because of language, because of nothing. They did have my passport because it was simply one thing. I had a debt to pay, and unless I paid, I wasn't going to get it. And that's simple. But they did give me my passport. I did end up going back home, and unfortunately for me, I was rejected because by then they already had told my community that I was a prostitute. So I was unsafe, and I had to leave again, and I went back exactly to where I didn't want to go. My options, and people would say, why didn't you go somewhere else? You don't have money. It's not like you can move to a country like an area where you've never been, because you need 3 to 4 months of rent, and you need a job, and you need somebody. So you tend to go to places where you have relatives or you have a contact. So my options were, we didn't have anybody who was living in the US that I could have immigrated illegally. But while my time in Japan, I had paid classes for Japanese, and the school said, we will sponsor you if you ever come back. So I sent my passport. Like I said, they were already breaking our windows. They were already, threatening my family. So I called the school and said, absolutely. So I went back to Japan, and I entered the country legally as a student. And so it was that wasn't human trafficking, but I willingly went back just because there was absolutely no other way. I ended up willingly working at a bar because I still had to pay the rent, and I still had to pay my school. And it was such a demoralizing thing. And like I said, I had my passport, and I willingly went because it's, like, we love to rescue people. We love to sit, but we give them no opportunities. And, fortunately for me, I had my passport, and I was able to set rules, and I was able to stay there for short enough just until I learned Japanese. And then I started getting amazing work. But, unfortunately, you don't, once you're being labeled a prostitute or a bar girl, you have no rights. And that's true in most countries. So when I was raped and I went to the police because they beat me up, the police refused to do anything. They were like, well, you are a bar girl. But I had my passport. I had a citizenship. But that's irrelevant. So it just, I did ended up living in Japan. But when I was almost murdered, that I woke up and I was unconscious and I was beaten up. And maybe it was something that happened because I was a woman living by myself and a foreigner, or it was something as a reminder that you don't ever break away from the Japanese mafia. Maybe it was something to send a message. I don't know. Because it just, like I said, I was at a bar, I was at the club with my girlfriends, I was a model, and I just kind of broke away and met somebody that I knew, and the last thing I remember was grabbing a drink, and that was it. And I woke up unconscious and beaten, and I had to spend months with surgery, and that's why I left, and I ended up in Canada. My marriage was short-lived, but because it was more, it was not based on the love, and my English was really basic too. Japanese was my second language, not English. But it was, it gave me the opportunity. In unlike Japan, Canada it's a melting pot. So I was, I didn't stand up. And when I ended up single and vulnerable, I had the opportunity to help myself, to borrow money, to go back to school, to learn English, to do a business administration diploma. Those things matter to people who are struggling, who are immigrant, that, they are so important. I've never been on welfare, but I was able to find programs that helped me out, that I didn't have to ask for help. I just needed those programs to be able to elevate myself. And I did great. I, mastered English, and I was doing great and winning awards for sales. But then my son lost his sight. And that's where it was just kind of like, I went right back where I was, unemployed and struggling, because now I was had a child with a disability. And that was the time where it was like, how many times do I have to build myself from the ashes? And that was the time when I thought, okay, maybe I'm asking for too little. Maybe I shouldn't be just surviving. Maybe I should be demanding the things that I deserve because of my work and my ability to, So I think I didn't retreat and ask very little. I was like, hey, here I am. I want a job. I want to be able to contribute to society. And if you don't give me the job, I'm going to create one for myself.
Yeah. So it gave you that fire almost to just.
Yes. I mean, I just, this time it was different. It affected my kids. I was so used to it. And I think that's sad that I had to experience that, I wasn't protecting myself as much as I was protecting my children. Like it was a difference. It was, once it affected them, I was like, how dare you? I should have done that for myself. I was already an adult. But, I had not, because nobody had even told me. Nobody had ever protected me as a child or as a teenager so I had never known those things. But instinctively, I did know how to do it for myself. Maybe because I was always the one that I was the highest earner in my family, and I was the one that supported everybody for a long time. So maybe I had that role very, I had mastered that role, but an ability. And now I try to treat myself as well as I treat my children. It's like, okay. And sometimes, like, I'm sorry, this is, I am the one that needs my attention and my love and my self-love.
Yeah, that's an important one as well. I mean, especially as a mother or a parent rather. It's a conversation I've had with my mom a couple of times, and trying to implement for myself as well to break the cycle. Like like you're doing with your family, is the things that I'm seeing at the age that I am. I'm trying to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself, and things only improve from me, because I'm the eldest of three sons, and I'm speaking to amazing people like you from all over the world. I'm reading and exploring, and I'm on my own journey. And the things that I'm learning, I'm realizing actually this is the reason I'm learning all of this is giving me a head start to make sure that eventually, when I have my own family, that things don't repeat themselves the way that I see happening in my family and other families around the world in terms of different situations. But what an interesting thing that I'd like to know is the day that you found out. Is your son's name Carl?
Yes.
Carl, yeah. So the day that do you remember the day that you found out that Carl had the condition that he had? And and if you did, what is your reaction? Because I can only imagine as a parent, it's the knee-jerk reaction is you get really emotional and like you don't know how to handle it. It's out of control, right? It's like, why this? A million and one questions is probably the best way to put it. How do you keep that under control so that you take the right steps?
Well, you don't like, and that's what I'm saying. Like I use that. It was like, instead of letting it drown, like I use that as a fuel. That was one of the things. Sitting there at the office and spending 8 months trying to figure out what was the problem, because there was obviously an issue, but it's such a difficult condition. Unless they knew what they were looking for, they weren't going to find it. It is called Conrad Dystrophy. And we were in family therapy because they thought he was faking, and he just kept saying, no, this is real, I really cannot see. And then the doctor saying there's nothing physical, so we kept going for therapy. And so it was sitting there, and the doctor saying, I remember my son and myself sitting there and say, yes, it is called Conrad Dystrophy, it is progressive, there's no cure, and it leads to blindness. That was the words, the first things that came out of his mouth. And he said, I want you to take, to get your son to be comfortable with the diagnosis, and to that he's going to go blind, and just to make sure that he's comfortable with that. And and of course my mind is just it's just, those words, those 3 words, and it was something that I cried, and we went home. But I used that. There was no way. You have to just kind of like, can I mute it, or do I use that as like, both of us, like, do not worry, and I'm like, look at me, we can do these. I am like, if you want to be miserable, and I'm like, he's only 11. And immediately he's just sitting there like, what's going on? I'm like, okay, I want you to understand this is happening. It is true. Want to be miserable and live in my basement and have a horrible life? You can do that. Or you can have an amazing life, and I'll help you. Either way is your choice, and it is just as hard, but the choice is yours. And my son is like, well, I want a great life. And I'm like, good, let's go for it. And that really is where, and then I immediately went to, and I didn't have time to think about it, to like, do I tell him, do I explain to him, or anything like that. I just simply knew that I needed to be honest, and to talk about it. He heard about it, and I wanted to specify. I wanted, like, if you have questions, ask me, right? Let's just discuss it. Do the opposite of like, let's just not discuss it. Let's discuss it fully until you are comfortable, right? So we did it. We went to we went online, and we started looking for examples of people, of athletes or celebrities or anybody who had visual impairment and blindness. They were doing great things. And I'm like, what do you think? And I was, and it was a wonderful thing. It was just kind of like, like, okay. But, within it all, he was comfortable. He just, actually, it did the opposite. I started to be more and more uncomfortable, because I would just kind of all of a sudden, like, this diagnosis is not something that we could just go to therapy and it goes away. It was just something that, what am I going to do? And he was comfortable. He's like, oh, finally somebody would believe me. Just make sure. He just wanted the programs. He wanted to continue going to school and to be with his friends. That's all he needed. But that's where 777 Run for Sight came as an idea. And it came very quickly, because the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Because, sitting there, I asked, as anybody else, the first, when I heard that diagnosis, like, how did it happen? And he said, well, it's bad luck. Your ex-husband and you carry the same faulty gene, but you both passed, because you need both of you to pass it. And he just kind of like, I feel like, how dare you? My son heard you saying that it is bad luck. And I was just like, and it bothered me, because words matter. Those things were going to be on the back of his head, and maybe he's going to have a bad day, and it's going to come, and he's just going to stay. And I just sat down, and I just started. Within 8 months of running, I did my first marathon, my first half, full, and ultra within 8 months. I just went, because I wanted to show my son, don't tell me, just show him how we can get better. And then I just decided that I was going to do the 777 Run for Sight, 7 ultra, 7 continent, 7 months. And it was because it's luck. And I said, I don't know. He said, bad luck. For all I know, it's good luck. You're here to teach us something. You're here to make me better. You're here to make the world better. And I want to celebrate you. And that was my first record. It was in honor of my son. And I cried, because, it's just simply, like I said, words matter. And that still bothers me. And now it's not a factor. He's a painter. He just graduated from the most
Wow.
prestigious martial arts school in Canada, Aiming the Cart, and the first to graduate with a C9 dog. So that's the difference. Words matter, and actions speak even louder.
That's I just because people who are listening right now probably need to pause this because just to digest the amount of information that you've shared so far, it's crazy. I mean, you have a way of turning every, I don't want to say negative, but every challenging situation into something that fuels you, and that I think is the trick. Like that
Yes,
is the thing that
yes,
stops you from
yes.
slowing down, is
Mhm,
just changing your perception or the story of that situation. Instead of bad luck, it's like, no, it's teaching me something. Maybe it's good luck. Maybe it's here for a reason. Whatever story you want to attach to it, I think we all have the freedom to change the story. And that's what we have to stop and really do. And I hope people take that away from what you have shared so far, is every time along the way, you've told yourself something to help you get through it.
mhm.
And that just literally comes down to self-talk. As
Yes,
simple as it sounds,
yes,
right?
yes. And I think that's, if you ask me what's the difference between people who quit and gave up and didn't find a way out to a difference. I mean, I don't haven't been, I'm no better. And I look at that and think that could have easily been me. But the difference is it's having that internally said, no, this is not it. This is not it. This is, it did not matter if circumstances, if the police or anybody else told me this is it, this is how much as you deserve, and it's, there was something that is just like it isn't, and let me show you why. And I think a lot of it is because I wanted it for myself. Those things I wanted, and I felt that I deserved them: education, opportunities, safety, those things. And then once I had kids, it just got even bigger, because I was like, not only I want it for myself, I want it for my children, right? And now it's like, as an activist, like I want it for society. So it just keep piling on, but it does come from internally, that it is. And I'm not going to say that it just, it's easy. It's like, oh, it's a switch. It's not like it just simply because I do get weighted down, and I sometimes have to take back, and it's like, is it true? Is it true that this is about as much? I mean, it just comes in wave. It just comes, and I was like, oh, no, it isn't. Oh, no, it isn't. It is having the absolute stillness belief that that it's not that you're right. People always say you'd like to be right. It's like, it doesn't. It just simply, I know instinctively something. And I just go ahead because I'm trusting my instinct. I think, this is something that it can be better. And I mean, after that, the doctor first, it was just, when he saw me doing articles about my son, he just said, like, you're doing a disservice to your son. You need to, prepare him. Don't give him false hopes. Within a year and a half after I broke a record, because people, they're not, they're not negative, or they just, it's not like they are jealous. It's just simply, that's their limit, that's their understanding, and they need somebody else to show them that it can be different. And I remember being at the airport and seeing him, and I was coming from my, I was preparing to, I was mountaineering, I was doing the 7 summits then, and I just saw him, and I was like, oh no, it's gonna yell at me. And he came in, he's like, gave me a hug, and it's like, I'm so sorry. And your son is so lucky, and I want to tell you how the advances of gene therapy and it's just like, now it was full of hope. It's like, your son was born in the perfect time because he's going to benefit. It was something. And I just kind of felt, it's like, it wasn't anything more than that was his limit of understanding. And he was trying to protect him and us, but we didn't need protection. And I just show him a different exit in a different way. And sometimes now, I mean, I try not to waste time with the, like if I hear something negative, I just simply quiet the mind. It was like, is this still, because I don't want it to be an ego. I don't want it to be just for proving. But if I go back and it's like, is my motivation right? Is this something that I need to do because for the right reasons? And if it's for the right reasons, I always go like, oh, like, and in the more, if it's something that is the bigger the obstacle, I was like, oh, I just tell myself, like, I'm so excited, because the bigger the obstacle, the better I become. And I am just about to do something amazing, and I'm just about to grow, and I get excited because I'm like, the bigger the obstacle, the better I get.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a chance to grow your character and just to become a lot stronger than you are today or that you were yesterday. It's just that's basically what this whole journey is about. What we've been talking about so far is just enjoying the journey as you grow through it, you know? So,
I mean, but it's up to you. I mean, you can either have those circumstances are beyond you. Like you can either and you just picture yourself in 5 years. What's the conversation? Are you going to be at a party telling them why your life sucks and explaining this happened? And I'm going to tell you my life sucks because of this happened. Or you're going to say, here's this story. This happened and this is what I did. I like that better. And it's up to me. It is absolutely up to me what story I'm going to be. I'm going to be like sad at the party telling like, yeah, I wanted all these things. But this happened. Or, whew, watch it. All these, but look at what happened. Yeah.
yeah, so there's something that came to me just as you were speaking there was something that one of my friends said who was on the show, I think it was last year now, and he said, don't go through life, grow through life. And as simple as that sounds,
Very true.
that was profound because it's literally what we're talking about in terms of changing the perspective, looking at everything as a chance to grow rather than, oh, it's just another day, you know.
Yeah,
And it's
I think
difficult when you get your head stuck in the day-to-day fast moving pace of whatever it is you're going through, to just stop and one, realize you've been given a chance to live another day. And my own personal belief is, if you have woken up, regardless of your situation, the story hasn't ended for you yet. And that's what keeps me going. Even if today was really bad, yesterday was bad, or every day up to today was bad, if I wake up tomorrow, that just means it's another day for me to try something, to do something, to explore something. It's not over yet. If it was, I wouldn't have woken up, you know? So
right.
it's just these small stories we tell ourselves. But what was the first run that you did before doing 777, like when you first knew, okay, this is where I'm actually getting serious about running? I think this is turned from a leisurely, just trying to get my head out of the situation I'm into, now I'm taking it seriously.
It was like I said, I was just running because I had to, and it was I think my best friend was training for Boston, and I kept calling her. She was the only friend that I had in Canada. I just, my life was just, it would get better, and it did, and it would get one job and lose it, and diagnosis. My boyfriend left me, and it was just kind of a lot, and I just needed to talk. And she was like, "Well, I'm training for Boston, so if you want to join me, because I don't have time." Because runners were so serious about our training. I was like, meantime, like raising two kids by myself, one with disability, working full time, and she was like training for Boston. So I mean, I am there now, right? But there's this where she's like, oh, Boston. So, and she's like, you know what? You should come with me because you're a slow runner, and I'm so fast because I come from 5, breaking speed record, breaking personal best. This is true, and we're still best friends. But like from fast 5Ks, I need somebody to slow me down because it's a marathon. So I went, and I was just like chatting, and pretty soon it was like, we would meet in my lunch hour. During my lunch hour, she would just go training. And then at one point she was like, you need to slow down. She's like, haven't said a word, not because it's interesting what you're saying, but you're killing me. And she just kind of went like, you know what? You should try and qualify for Boston. And if you do that, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for your trip, and I'll pay for your race. And that's all I needed. My life was out of control. I needed something that I could control. I was turning 40 as well. She's like, for your 40th, I'll take you. And it was just like magic. It was all I needed. It was the one thing that I could focus, that I could train. And I did. I went online and I downloaded a training program because I had no idea. I just been running recreationally. And so I signed for my first half marathon, and then my first marathon. And that was, like I said, it was about 6 months. And I did phenomenal on the half, better than, I have no idea about times or anything like that. I just went until, okay, it has to hurt, but I have to be able to breathe. That was it. And then my first marathon, I qualified for Boston within, I think I still had like 10 minutes extra. I think I was supposed to be the time I was aiming. I had no idea how. Like I said, I just went for it. Every time I saw somebody that it was kind of running my pace, I tag along. And if I passed them, they weren't allowed to pass me anymore. I was just like, that was my game plan. So I did. And that's when I just kind of went like, this is, how much potential do I have that I've not given myself an opportunity, just because I believe what people told me? people are born runners. It's bad for you, all those things. And I just kind of start feeling it's like, Jesus, like I have, for everything I've done that I overcome, I still had so much more potential that I had, unlocked. And I thought, from now on, I will find my own limits. And that was it. I went for Boston, and so then it became a lifestyle. It wasn't like, oh, quietly. I mean, I went and tried and looked for a running coach. And I thought, if I can do these by myself, I can only imagine if I have a coach. And I just sat down and first meeting is like, so what would you like to do? And it's like, I want to improve my time. This is my first marathon. He's like, it's impossible to improve in Boston. I was like, thank you very much. And I left. And I did improve my time in Boston for like 12 minutes. And my pictures like screaming with my arms out in the air. And I was like, this is what I mean. Stop telling people what not to do. Do not protect people from disappointment. Unless it's dangerous and it's a truck coming at me, let me disappoint myself. Because then I will, that's protecting from disappointment. That's nothing that's stopping you from living your fullest life. I was like, I embrace those things. So, and that really is where I qualified for Boston. But Boston wasn't for another 10 months. And I needed that race. I needed to continue training. I needed to do because it was working. And I went online and tried to find a race that was close to me because I had no money. And that it was on the week that my kids were going to go see their father. So I was like, August long weekend, Canada, in Alberta. And something pop into my screen that is called the Canadian Death Race. It was 62 miles. 125 kilometers. And I had never in my life heard of anything like that. And it just popped and I called. And I thought, well, there's some teams. Maybe I can do a leg or two. And they said, the teams are full, but we have a solo. If you want it, we can give it to you. And I said, yes. And it was like, I had just run my first marathon. It was like 2 weeks later, I did my first ultra marathon. I've never been in so much pain in my life. Because I didn't know, I wasn't trained. It was just long distance. I was unprepared. I had hypothermia. People were pledging me, instead of $200, I fundraised for $3,500 for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. But most people were pledging me not to go. They said, you're going to die. And I was like, how dare you take my happiness away? So I went anyways. And it was fantastic. As they're bringing me down with hypothermia, because I fell in a creek and I didn't have an spare. I've never felt more alive in my life. I was like, this is just the most amazing feeling because it's quiet. I mean, I had just been laid off for another job. And I think the rumination of like, oh no, what am I going to do? Like it lasted for about 2 hours. And then after that, I spent the whole night, like in nature with other people, with cheering, with all these feelings. I've never felt more alive. And that's where I was like, I'm going to go to Boston, but this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I did. I dedicated to ultra running after that. I did that race again, won my age group and came 9th female overall. And then did all the series, every single race in my area, won the first female, second overall. And then that's when I was like, I'm ready for the record. It went really, really fast. Once I knew what to do, it was just simply like, okay, managing my time.
Yeah, that if we're just thinking back to where this conversation started to where you've now ended up, I hope you have taken the time somewhere in between all of this stuff that you've done to just be proud of yourself. That's probably the best way to put it, to be proud of yourself for what you've done for your kids as well. Because imagine not just the things that Carl's doing and other members of your family are probably inspired by as well, but the stories that they are going to be able to tell about their own mom and what the Norma, the grandma, did. As time goes on, you eventually become a grandma if you're not already. And it's the definition of just breaking the cycle, because you're doing one thing after the next, and it's just as you said, it becomes a lifestyle and a mindset. It's not just I'm going to break the cycle and remove the trauma or the emotional abuse that you've endured, but I'm going to make this a point to just put a fork in the road and say, actually, this in the Bastidas family line, this is where things changed because I decided to take things in a different direction and change the script of where this movie was going almost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it is, but for my kids, it's, you know, like I said, my family, my kids, I'm proud of them as much as they're proud of me. I think we're just, you know, and yes, now they're, you know, 21 and 25, they're more aware. They come, you know, my youngest was at the United Nations when I addressed the assembly. And, you know, so, you know, like, and they have stories of, you know, once in a while, like being, you know, like they're just kind of crazy stories to be at school and, you know, one of them going into a class and then all of a sudden noticing my picture from a clip of paper on because the science teacher was my fan. It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know who's son of Norma, and it's just kind of like, Mom, I was so embarrassed. And it's like, and I did, I mean, also because I ran from here in Canada, Vancouver, Canada, I you know, 2012, I decided to grab a pack and run all the way to where I was born. And that's where the book is. And eventually, so it's now being, you know, it's going to be made into a movie. It's called Running Home. And I just decided that I needed to talk about it. My son was already 18 and he was doing fantastic. He was like, I can advocate for myself. And I thought, what do I do? I did a documentary for Oprah Winfrey. It's called Extraordinary Mothers, that it gave me a platform. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to talk about it. And I thought, this is kind of awkward because there's so much that people don't know about it, that it's okay. It was about my son at the beginning, but now he can take care of himself. And I thought, what do I do with these? And he's just kind of feeling like, you can't give me a medal for doing what every mother would do, which is try to make sure that the kids have opportunities, that the history doesn't repeat itself. And you cannot shame me for something that happened to me. So either I'll tell you what happened and if you hate me, that's fine. But you cannot give me a medal for going to a mountain or going to a desert. Those things, I trained for it. People help you all along the way. Escaping violence, it was done by myself without help. So I deserve a medal more for that. But instead, it was something that I wasn't supposed to talk about. And it was something that ultimately, you know, now my community wanted to give me an award. So I decided to do that. But, you know, it wasn't as simple as landing and talking about it. So I just remember telling my sisters, like, it would be easier if I run home than if I talk about what happened at home. And I was like, that's it. So I did. I just grabbed a pack, small, fast packing, with a little tent and a little sleeping bag. And I just went through the highways and along the coast and made it all the way to Mazatlan, Mexico, where I was born, and talked about what happened. Because it was like, I shouldn't have left. Violence should have eradicated, should have ended where it started, because I moved around and I found it all over the world. So we need to really be better at doing that, eliminating violence from our homes, from our communities, you know? I mean, I see it now, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be trying to cross the border, but, you know, we need to work better as to make sure all along the way, either, you know, the countries where they're coming from now with immigration, they need to really make sure that the communities, the women, the children, they're safe. But also, if they do manage to get to the other side of the border, they have the resources. They are not going to be re-victimized, because that's what happened to me. So I work on both ends, with the countries and with shelters on the other side of the borders, because, you know, you can't stop it just to tell them don't do it. It's like it's a matter of life or death, you know. So that was kind of what the book came about. And my kids, I mean, of course, incredibly proud, but you know, for myself, I mean, I do get awards in my kids, but most of the time I deal with a lot of women that couldn't find a way out, you know, and that could easily be me. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I'm better. I just sometimes I spend so much time trying to convince women to find help. And sometimes I'm unable to convince them. I do know that they feel better because for the first time they heard and they're seen. And, you know, that's kind of a terrible, terrible situation for myself to know that they said, it's okay. At least I know that you know, there's somebody that believes me, there's somebody that, you know, that believes in me. And that's not good enough for me. So for as much as proud, I spend more time just realizing, you know, trying to dissect, you know, can I teach these? Can I teach these so more women feel worthy as I did? how can I teach it better? How can I, because like I said, it is something that it is a choice, but I still have a hard time convincing. It depends of the resources. It depends on so many things, convincing more people to get out.
Mm. That's a big responsibility to take on as well, like to try and help, and then knowing that some people may not be able to do that,
We
and
have to try.
realizing, yeah, exactly. But that's the thing, you have to try. But it's difficult to keep that emotional distance almost from the situation, regardless of the outcome, knowing that I've put in my effort, I've tried as much as I can, and now it's down to the other person. But I think most important of all, regardless of what happens with each of those individuals, is the fact that you actually well, give me a second. Okay, yeah, the phone was ringing there, so it stopped now. Um, it is a fact that you've done it for yourself, and so there's going to be people out there, like myself, like Alia, like Jeanette, like many other women who are listening, men or women, who listen, and that's all they need is to just hear that, oh, there's one human being out there who's done it, so I'm going to do that. And there's probably people out there who've listened to your story who you will never meet or never know, who have
Mhm.
gone on to do certain things just because of what you've said that you've accomplished and you've done, so it's amazing, and I'm so grateful that we had the chance to talk and go through all of this. And I want to actually finish off with the final few questions, because I know we've been going for a little while now. But one thing I was curious about, actually, with the 777 and triathlon and all of those things that you've done, is can you just give some insight behind some of the what the training was like, I guess, on a day-to-day basis?
Wow. Yeah, no, it's, for the 777, because it was actually racing. It was like doing actual races back to back. And it was just flying to continents. So a lot of it is a lot of training to start the record. And then the record itself became, just, I didn't do a lot in between. It's just simply the races were the training. So for a record, it would take about a year and a half of training, and it starts with trying to get the body aligned, because like right now I'm trying to prepare for what's next. I still have a few projects, but it is going to the gym, and I still swim and bike and cycle, and mostly run to maintain a base, right, but without wearing my body too much. And then hitting the gym. Every record I come back, there's something that I come back that with an injury, whether it's from nerve injury or an actual injury. So try to work those muscles to support the joints or the nerve that is helping me, whether it's my knee. And for the 777 Run for Sight was I had, I mean, I was running between, I would say, about 20 miles a day. That was my average, between 10 to 12. And then I will increase it to about 30 miles for usually during the Christmas break, because that's when, everybody kind of, it's busy. And, that's when I can really dedicate myself to that, about 30 miles a day for about, I try sometimes to do it in a row, as many days as possible. Sometimes I was able to do 3 and then a day off, and then try to increase it and things like that. So, but on average, 20 miles a day. For the world record, I had to learn to swim to break the Guinness World Record for the world longest triathlon. That was something that I focused more on the swimming than anything else, because the running, I had a lot of base. I knew that I was going to be comfortable running about 40 miles a day. So that, because, I've done it long enough. For running home, I did a lot of trying to eat, going on a run, just being on my feet and trying to eat in gas stations, because I had no support group. So I had to learn to tolerate food, that it was like really terrible quality of food, because that a lot of it was, and it is training, try to, get my stomach to tolerate that. There's always, like when I come back, there's always an injury that I have to deal with. I think by the time the Guinness World Record for the world longest triathlon came, it was where really my body was just trash. And it was because it was probably the distance, but also the intensity. Even though I had a crew with me, it was, we're talking about massive days of swimming in the open water, the weather, the sun, we're talking about 11 to 12 hours a day of actual, doing something like either swimming, biking, or running. and the elements and everything. And I ended up with a nerve injury. And from the position from swimming in open water, because you have to sight where you're going. And it's the waves, the massive waves. So just trying to stretch myself and swim. Also the aggressive position on the bike for, I think I was between 200, 220 kilometers a day, about 150 miles a day. So that was a lot. And it was 2 years, and I had incredible, I do smaller races in between. They are huge for people, but not for myself, just because of my records tend to be enormous. So I did the bad water, and I had a very hard time because of the nerve pain that it was 135 miles. And I did finish, but I barely finished. And then I just went, and they couldn't figure it out. They just could not figure out what was wrong. And they said, this might be it. And so I just thought, if this is my life, then I'm just going to go and, continue, because I still want to continue doing this race. So I signed for Vol State 500, which is 500 kilometers. And it's self-supported, and you basically run and sleep on the street. I just had a garbage bag, and I was sleeping at gas stations, and he fixed my neck. I was like, that's what I needed. So I was like, okay, run 500 kilometers, sleep on the on the sidewalks. And I came back, I was like, oh, that was hard. But I placed 9th overall and 3rd female. It was fantastic. And it just, like I said, I don't know, like I just learned to just not panic. Like, don't panic sometimes where you are. It's just there's circumstances, but that doesn't mean that that's the rest of your life, right?
That's amazing. I mean, it seems like as well throughout this period, it's like you don't really take advice from other people. You just listen to your intuition and what you feel like is the right thing to do, which I resonate with a lot, because it's how I've been making a lot of my decisions over the last few years.
Well, this is the thing. If you're doing something where there's a lot of research and there's a lot of experts and everybody knows everything about it, you're not breaking new ground. And that's okay. If that's, if you would like to be uncomfortable and said, okay, just tell me what to do. And I just, but that's not who I am. If I'm going to do something and there's a lot of research, a lot of people have done it, and I have a plan, it's already in a book somewhere. I'm like, I always keep thinking, it's like, I still can give some more. I think there's a lot more in me. So if it seems like a good idea for everybody else, then it's not a good idea. Once I say, I think we should do these, I think I should do these, and a lot of people start panicking, I was like, hey, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And that's where I want to write. A lot of what happened to me was something that I had, it's like that book was written for me. By the time I was born into that family, and that that book was written for me. Those chapters were already in progress, and I just became a supporting cast of that story. I want to write the rest of the chapters. I want to be the main character, and I want to write fully the rest of the chapters in my life.
Hmm. Is there another challenge that you're thinking of doing? What's on your mind at the moment?
Oh, do I ever? I do. I mean, I've been talking about it, just simply trying to find, I've been training, especially with the idea of talking about, trying to find a safety somewhere. I'm just right now training to run across the US-Mexico border, the length from Texas to California, to raise funds for East LA Women's Center. And just kind of like to have the conversation of saying, yeah, this is fine, whatever side you want, don't come, but you have to support people. You can't stop people just by telling them not to. So you got to, whatever side of the border you are, you have to make sure that you're supporting the people on both sides.
What's the distance?
It is, it's almost 2,000 miles.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm ready. I mean, It's just a matter of finding the volunteers to support me along the way. That's it. That's where I've been sickly. I also been training for 2021 to row across the Pacific Ocean. So that's another thing. So I've been training for that. I put that on hold, and I thought, you know what? I get frustrated because I hear this conversation, but I also see a lot of people doing nothing about it. And I'm one of the few people that can go and say, hey, we should do something about it. Then I'm like, because I've been there. It's not something that I hear and is fancy. It's just simply, I've been there. And yes, I am tired of going to conferences and people hear my story and people said, I wish I've done something. And I was like, it's true. You didn't know me. And that was such a long time ago. This is the time. It is the time now to do something about it for somebody else. Do not wait for 20 years until a few people that will encounter all these problems and they will overcome them. And then we're going to go and clap. And this is the time. There's no better time in the world to do something than right now. So that's why I want to run across the US-Mexico border.
I love that. And do you have a time for when that's going to happen?
I'm going to in August, I'm going to speak at the EmpowerCon, and then I'm meeting with the East LA Women's Center, the director, Barbara Capos, and we're just going to, like I said, I've been training physically, I'm ready. So it's just simply of trying to find the volunteers, because it's going to take me about a month and a half, because it's a difficult terrain. So try to find the volunteers. So I ideally would like to start sometime in October, but maybe it's going to be between October, maybe starting January. It's just to find the volunteers to drive the car across for safety reasons, because that is not going to go down well. So for safety reasons, I am sure that somebody in Texas is going to get the wrong idea that I'm pro something, and I'm not. I'm just simply trying to have a conversation. And I do not want to be used as a prop anymore for a conversation. I want to be like proof what you just told me, that you care. I want to see something happening, right? So for safety reasons, I do need a car, but otherwise, I think January 2020 is probably something that is more realistic.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see you do that. And I know already from the conversation that we have, from the small time that I've had a chance to get to know, that you'll make it happen, and you'll create some ripple effect and some waves as a result of doing it. So just to wrap up with the final question, what would be some lessons that you'd want to pass on to the world now that you've come to this point in your life?
Fall in love with your life. It's your life, and where you are, it is your starting point. You're not your circumstances. So, those are the things that we carry all these of, like I said, I'm not depression, I'm not human trafficking, I'm not bipolar. Those things are circumstances and what happened and all those things. But fall in love with your life. It is your life, and it is possible, right? If I can fall in love with my life after what I've been doing, I could look back and hate it, but I don't. I absolutely don't, every single day. And that's the difference between myself and other people. I get excited, right? I absolutely get excited in the mornings of trying to, and even when it's hard. So it's your life, fall in love with it. Fall in love with, trust the process too. Because that's what people love accomplishing, but not the process. It's like, and that's where I love. By the time I'm doing the record, I just resent it, because I'm like, just get it done. What I love is actually the process where nobody's paying attention, watching me get up at 5 a.m., go for, 6-7 hour training, when nobody's paying attention, keeping motivating when I shouldn't, and just watching myself excel with absolutely no cameras, that's what makes me happy, because I know that that the records or the things are broken when nobody's paying attention. By the time I stand on the stage or I am on a record, it's already broken. It's here. So trust the process.
Amazing lessons to pass on, and you've shown it through the stories that we've spoken about so far. So, and I definitely vouch for the trusting the process, because that's where all the enjoyment is. It's not in the accomplishment. Is you're excited about that for a day, for an hour, for a minute, but then you think of the next thing, and it's the process that takes longer than anything, that takes up most of the time. So if you can fall in love with that, that's where you're not looking forward to like a milestone or an end goal, but more about, I'm excited for the 1% of improvement that I accomplished today, and then another 1% tomorrow, and then just becoming a little bit better every day. So that I think that's an important habit to cultivate, and a mindset to cultivate as well. But I feel like we could talk for hours, so we definitely have to do another part 2, 6 to 7 months from now in 2020 to see how far you've come. But
yes, after the run in Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. What's the best place for people to find out more about you, follow you, your book, documentary, all that kind of stuff?
Social media, on Sugar Coated Media, it's right now doing it's going to be publishing my running home book, and also doing the PowerCon. That's my next conference just before, and it's going to be tight because I'm promoting a documentary. It's called Woman, that I am promoting with Nelson Mandela's stepdaughter and myself. Hussein and myself are promoting. So I have to leave the conference at 11, and I have to board a plane and go to Venice Film Festival. So it's going to be tight. But so at Sugar Coated Media, have all the information about my next conference. Social media, Ultra Run Wild. They can find me on Twitter. They can find me on Instagram. I haven't started. I'm on Facebook, but I sometimes take breaks because, like I said, it's urgent. Everybody wants to ask me, one by one what I'm doing. So that takes, that's not urgent. That's not important. It's urgent. So it's on hold right now, but they can also find me there as Norma Bastidas. But right now, Twitter and Instagram is Ultra Run Wild.
Awesome. Well, I'll get you to send me all those links so I can put it in the description and people can follow wherever they want to follow. But thank you so much for taking the time, to share your wisdom, to share your journey, and to share your heart. And I look forward to having many more conversations like this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.